Hello friends. On April 11, 1970, a rocket lifted off from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, embarking on the Apollo 13 mission. This mission was intended to transport 3 astronauts to the moon. Remarkably, it was only a little over 9 months since Neil Armstrong had taken humanity's first steps on the lunar surface. Apollo 13 marked NASA's third attempt to land humans on the moon. Given the success of the previous 2 missions, the astronauts aboard Apollo 13 were brimming with confidence. They were poised to achieve their dream of walking on the moon. However, they were unaware that their aspirations would soon face unprecedented challenges. As April 1970 progressed, Apollo 13 was about 330,000 kilometers away from Earth when disaster struck. A deafening explosion suddenly rocked the spacecraft, and within moments, alarms and warning lights began flashing incessantly. An oxygen tank had exploded, and the second tank was rapidly leaking. The situation was dire. Commander Jim Lovell's calm but alarming message to Mission Control was, "Okay, Houston, we've had a problem here." The response from Houston was a disbelieving, "This is Houston, say again please." Lovell repeated, "Houston, we have a problem." Mission Control, initially skeptical, thought the instruments might be malfunctioning. However, the astronauts could see the consequences firsthand through their spacecraft's windows. The air was leaking out, and the spacecraft had deviated significantly from its trajectory. The Apollo 13 crew was moving away from Earth at an alarming rate, setting a new distance record. To this day, no human has ventured as far from Earth as the Apollo 13 crew did during this mission. The immediate concern was not about landing on the moon, but rather whether they could return to Earth safely. The situation grew increasingly critical as carbon dioxide levels began to rise in the spacecraft, causing the crew to suffer from the toxic buildup. The mission had turned into a desperate struggle for survival. In 1961, President John F. Kennedy had boldly declared that the United States would land a man on the moon and return him safely to Earth before the decade was out. This ambitious goal was set against the backdrop of the Cold War, a period of intense rivalry between the United States and the Soviet Union. Both superpowers were fiercely competing to demonstrate their technological prowess, with space exploration being a significant battleground. By 1969, NASA had achieved the remarkable feat Kennedy had promised. Apollo 11 and Apollo 12 successfully landed astronauts on the moon, and they returned safely. Kennedy's promise was fulfilled, but it had an unexpected consequence. Public and governmental interest in space exploration and funding began to wane. The initial excitement of seeing a man walk on the moon was difficult to sustain for subsequent missions. As a result, NASA's budget was cut, leading to the cancellation of several planned missions, including Apollo 20. Apollo 13 thus became a critical mission, not only to continue scientific exploration, but also to demonstrate that investing in space exploration remained worthwhile. The primary goal of Apollo 13 was not just to survey the moon's surface, but to further develop human capabilities to operate in the lunar environment. The spacecraft design for Apollo 13 was similar to its predecessors, featuring 4 main components: the command module, the service module, the lunar module, and the launch escape system. It was launched aboard a Saturn V rocket. The command module, where the astronauts spent most of their time, was a small cone-shaped structure measuring 11 feet in length and 13 feet in diameter. It housed the essential instruments, navigation equipment, radios, life support systems, and small engines. The service module, which contained most of the spacecraft's oxygen and additional engines and fuel cells, was crucial for the mission. Together, the command and service modules (CSM) were attached throughout the mission and only separated during re-entry to Earth. The lunar module was designed to land on the moon and then dock back with the CSM. The launch escape system (LES) was a safety feature intended to protect the astronauts during launch, but was jettisoned once the spacecraft was safely in flight. On April 11, 1970, the Apollo 13 mission began with a successful launch, and the LES was discarded as planned. The crew consisted of Commander Jim Lovell, Lunar Module Pilot Fred Haise, and Command Module Pilot Jack Swigert. Interestingly, none of these astronauts were originally selected for this mission. They replaced the original crew due to various issues, making their journey a matter of chance. The launch was witnessed by around 200,000 spectators, a stark contrast to the 7 million who watched Apollo 11's launch. This demonstrated how quickly public interest in space missions had diminished. Despite this, the spacecraft proceeded smoothly toward its destination, the Fra-Mauro crater on the Moon's surface, a site believed to hold valuable scientific data about both the Moon and Earth. The initial days of the mission went without incident. On the second day, a minor distraction occurred when astronaut Jack Swigert realized he had forgotten to file his income tax return. Mission Control humorously granted him a 60-day extension, reflecting how routine and uneventful the mission seemed at that point. However, the third day, April 13, brought a dramatic shift. The crew was instructed to conduct tests on the lunar module and prepare for a television broadcast showcasing the spacecraft's interiors. The public's interest was so low that no television network broadcast the segment. Approximately 6.5 minutes after the broadcast ended, flight controllers instructed Swigert to check the oxygen levels, a routine procedure. In a shocking turn of events, a massive explosion occurred, triggering a flurry of warning lights and alarms. Lovell's message to Mission Control was a stark reminder of their predicament. "Houston, we have a problem." It became clear that one of the oxygen tanks was empty and the other was depleting rapidly. Mission Control initially doubted the data, suspecting instrumentation errors, but the reality of the situation soon became undeniable. The spacecraft's oxygen tanks, which stored oxygen in liquid form, had suffered a catastrophic failure. Tank number 2, originally installed in Apollo 10 and later modified, had been damaged during repair. The damage was not detected during inspection, and the tank was put into service. The tank's heater, designed to convert liquid oxygen into gas, had malfunctioned due to extreme heating, reaching temperatures far beyond what the thermometer could record. This overheating caused the insulation on the electrical wires inside the tank to fail, leading to the explosion. Fortunately, the tank was mounted on the outside of the spacecraft, and the explosion was contained. Had it occurred inside, it could have been fatal for the crew. Instead, only a 13-foot panel on the service module was damaged, but the extent of the internal damage was unclear. NASA faced a critical decision: how to return the astronauts safely to Earth. One option was to rotate the spacecraft to return quickly, but this required starting the service module's main engine, which was near the explosion site. The second option involved traveling around the Moon to return to Earth, which wouldn't need the service module's engine, but would take 4 to 5 days. The critical issue was whether the astronauts had enough oxygen and water for the extended journey. Mission Control opted for the second, safer route, instructing the crew to use the lunar module as a lifeboat. The lunar module was designed to support 2 astronauts for about 20 hours, but now it would need to sustain all 3 crew members for 4 to 5 days. The engines, not intended for repeated use, posed another risk. To conserve resources, all non-essential systems were shut down, including the heaters. The crew performed the first engine burn of the lunar module to adjust their trajectory. This maneuver took them around the far side of the Moon, setting a record for the greatest distance from Earth ever reached by humans, 400,000 kilometers. With the extended journey, survival margins were tight. To ensure they would make it back to Earth, the lunar module's engine was burned a second time, reducing the return time from 153 to 143 hours, providing an additional 11 hours of survival time. As if things weren't complicated enough, the spacecraft faced a new challenge: high carbon dioxide levels. Lithium hydroxide canisters used to remove CO2 were only sufficient for 2 people for 2 days, not 3 people for 4 days. However, there were extra canisters in the command module, but their filters were the wrong shape. The ground team had to improvise a solution using available materials. They devised a makeshift device to adapt the canisters, successfully reducing CO2 levels. The astronauts faced extreme measures to conserve their supplies. They were limited to drinking only 200 milliliters of water a day to avoid excessive urination, which could alter the spacecraft's trajectory. The crew lost a total of 14 kilograms in weight, and astronaut Haise developed a urinary tract infection. As Apollo 13 approached Earth, it became evident that another engine burn was necessary. The spacecraft had deviated from its planned trajectory due to unaccounted for cooling vapor. Lovell executed a third burn, correcting the course. Despite the lunar module being designed for only one burn, it withstood the stress, and the spacecraft remained on track. The world watched anxiously, holding its breath as the spacecraft re-entered Earth's atmosphere. Communication blackout during re-entry was expected, but it extended beyond the usual 23 minutes. For over 4 minutes, there was no contact, heightening fears about the astronauts' fate. Finally, after 4 minutes and 27 seconds, contact was restored. The astronauts had survived. The command module's parachutes deployed, and it descended safely into the Pacific Ocean. This mission, despite its failure to land on the moon, became a testament to human resilience and ingenuity. The Apollo 13 mission is celebrated for its dramatic rescue, the bravery of its crew, and the quick thinking of the NASA team. The mission was a remarkable achievement in problem-solving, teamwork, and perseverance, leaving a lasting legacy in space exploration. I hope you find this account as captivating as I do. It's incredible to reflect on the challenges faced and overcome during Apollo 13, and how it continues to inspire us in the pursuit of exploration and innovation.